hope you're doing well. We're just going to give it a few more minutes to allow everyone to join. Got quite a few people on today. I think this is going to be a nice session around AI. Just another moment. The list is going up quite quickly, which is nice. Okay, we will go on and begin our introductions so that we can ensure everybody finishes the session on time as well. I appreciate you joining. I know you're all quite busy people. So my name is Hope. I am a Sage Solutions account manager. Some of you may have already had contact with me if I'm your account manager. If not, I'm sure we will speak in the future. I have got Nick on with me. He is a Sage Intacct Solutions Consultant. So out of the two of us, I like to say he's got the brains. So he's going to be doing a demo around AI and everything that entails. So I just want to brief you on, if you haven't seen GoTo before, how you use it. You can ask questions at any point. You just have to look in the top right-hand corner at the box with the question mark in. If you pop a question in there, it comes straight to us. We can then read them out at the end and show you how that works. If you have any questions, like for instance, the image isn't working or our voices seem distorted, pop them in the box beside the question marks, the one with the two speech bubbles. That again goes directly to us, but we can review that and reply to you privately there. If for any reason you want to be unmuted, that is absolutely fine to ask your question. You can use the React button at the bottom, which is on the bottom left-hand corner with the high five sign. If you click that, we will know you want to be unmuted and we can let you ask your questions. Again, we would prefer to ask questions at the end, but if it's something urgent, please let us know. But yes, in the meantime, I will let Nick get started on Sage Intacct AI and how they can help you while using your Intacct.
Yep, brilliant. Thank you, Hope. Fantastic. So if we just have a look at the agenda of what we're going to run through today. So I'm going to start by kind of framing how Sage are kind of approaching AI and how they're trying to implement it into their products. So I'm going to do a few slides at the start just to kind of give context on Sage's mission, how they approach building these tools, how they expect or want finance people to use them. And then we'll look at the actual tools themselves on the Intacct platform. So we've got 4 of the live tools that I'm going to show you, but there's kind of 6. We'll have a look at the full list and kind of run through the 4 which I think are probably most applicable to the people on the call. Then we're going to finish with some more slides. I'm just going to go through Sage's AI roadmap, the kind of plans that they got for the future, a lot of the kind of agentic AI, which may be a bit of a buzzword, which you hear a lot about very well, kind of all the time now. I feel like everyone's talking about agentic AI. So we'll just close on that, and then we'll finish with some questions right at the end. Brilliant. So starting with Sage's commitment to AI, you may or may not have seen a lot of marketing around this kind of campaign to do with Sage AI. Sage are putting kind of all of their eggs in this basket, understandably, because it's such a big kind of revelation, I guess, or it's a big move in the kind of tech industry at the moment, just like the kind of .com in the past and move into kind of telecom. Before that, this is the kind of the new age of kind of evolution of technology, and Sage have really kind of focused on essentially just putting all their eggs in this basket and putting all the R&D investment into this, which is really, really nice to see. So a lot of the content you're going to see is actually from a meeting that Sage had last week. So I caught up with someone from the Sage team on Friday, and he kind of shared a lot of these information from these slides with me, and he literally said, like, this is being published today, which was Friday, and that essentially, yeah, a lot of this stuff was just discussed internally and is now kind of publicly available. So really exciting stuff. This is fresh off the press, if it's hot off the press, if you will, and yeah, really interesting. So let's have a look at framing the types of AI that Sage have currently. So I think it's quite important to kind of understand how Sage have actually categorized or kind of put their different types of AI into buckets, because when we talk about AI, it's such a general term and it can get quite easy to kind of get lost in that blanket term without actually defining what the tool does. So if we actually look at the 5 types that Sage like to use to categorize in terms of the finance tools that they have, starting right on the left there, we've got reactive AI. And essentially reactive AI is, very bluntly, is it handles inputs in real time, but it doesn't retain any information or adjust any behaviors based on previous interactions. So if you think spam filters, voice assistants, assembly lines for robots, NPCs, that kind of thing, it's very kind of procedural in the sense that you give it a task, and essentially it can just repeat that task over and over again without having to use its own brain. Essentially, it just basically carries through a set of tasks, and essentially you could use this for, or Sage intend to use this to speed up repetitive things like very boring admin work, or things that where essentially you're doing the same set of tasks over and over again. We want to be able to automate that, speed that up through reactive AI. Next one on the list, we've got limited memory. There's quite a few different terms that I've heard for this, but essentially it just uses stored historical data to make predictions or decisions that may evolve over time. So you may have heard this referred to as unsupervised learning, and essentially it's a form of machine learning. And what that means is essentially the computer's brain is just teaching itself based on a large framework of data that you've given it. So it basically manages to read a large database. It can essentially tokenize, or it can process that in its own language. And then based off of the database that it has, it's able to spot patterns, make decisions. It's really strong for fraud detection. You can see the examples on the screen. We have self-driving cars, predictive text, social media algorithms. And you'll see this is quite prevalent in a lot of the tools that we're going to look at today, namely the GL outlier assistant. So essentially we're able to use unsupervised learning to basically check all of our databases based on all of the information that we have in our GL. And if we have any inputs or any kind of journal entries that come in, we can compare that journal entry against all of our information that we have in the database previously. Because we have this limited memory AI, it can do that in seconds for us, as opposed to, if we had to cross-reference that against thousands of journal entries, then it would take hours and hours, if not days. Next one on the list, again, probably a bit of a buzzword, one that you would have heard a lot of recently. We've got generative AI, probably the one that people are most familiar with in terms of how we interact with AI day to day. In terms of kind of large language models, your chat GPTs or any kind of chat bots, things that we actually consciously interact with. This is what we class as generative AI. And to put it crudely, it's essentially just an AI which can essentially just generate text, images, code, reporting. And again, it's based on patterns of data. So if you're asking it to recall information and generate an essay, then essentially it will generate an essay based on all of the sources that it has available to it. And if you want a more kind of technical definition, it produces new outputs based on the patterns it has learned from large databases. And then in Intacct, again, for those, I know we've got quite a few existing Intacct customers on the call, which is great to see. You probably will have been familiar with Sage Copilot, the search assistant. We're going to go through it anyway today on the webinar very briefly, because there's a few people on the call who aren't on Intacct, so it'd be great for them to see it. And essentially, we have Copilot. So Copilot is a form of generative AI, coincidentally also named the same name as Microsoft's AI bot, but they're different tools. It's really important distinction is that they're different tools. So it's important that Sage kept Copilot. I spoke to the guy on Friday, and he kind of emphasized this point that they recognized that the names were the same, but they wanted Copilot was so aptly fit to what the tool was, where it's a Copilot. It's not, Jarvis from Iron Man. This is something that's an assistant. It's something to help you. It's a Copilot that they thought, well, I think it's worth the trade-off because of the kind of the symbolism around the name. It's worth keeping it despite the crossover between Microsoft's Copilot. But this isn't an imported chatbot. This isn't just an LLM which has been taken off. This is Sage's their own AI tool, which has been embedded and created by Sage, and it's pretty powerful and useful, which we're going to look at. Then next we've got Agentic AI. So again, this is something that's always been talked about. It's been talked about a lot recently, and not always been around. To make it again a crude definition, essentially anything that classes as AI, which is agentic, is essentially something that can carry out multiple steps completely autonomously. So you may define a workflow, you may define a set of tasks, and if a computer can carry out those set of tasks completely autonomously, that's what we class as agentic. So if you think about fully self-driving vehicles, Amazon Q, which is a tool which some people may have used through AWS, these are fully autonomous. These are agentic AI, and this is something that Sage are looking to develop and implement in the future. And as we'll see when we look at the roadmap, it's not too far in the distant future. And then finally, we've got artificial general intelligence. So this is the kind of more abstract or the theoretical stuff that you might see in films, where you see robots that are kind of fully autonomous and they're going to come over and kind of destroy the world. Or any kind of prototype videos you might see online. That is essentially what artificial general intelligence is. And it's really important that none of the, I'm just going to emphasize that none of the tools that we're going to look at today are anywhere near to doing anything that a human could recreate. Anything that an AI could recreate that a human does. These are tools that are here to assist you. They're not here to replace you. And the idea of kind of artificial general intelligence, these again are robotic assistants, and this is something that may be coming, decades down the line. But it's important to just make that distinction that these aren't tools that are going to, become a member of the team. These are things to help speed up everyday processes. And yeah, hopefully you'll see some value in the ones we look at. Brilliant. So then we've got Sage's 5 pillars of commitment. And it was really interesting hearing Rob from Sage break these down and how they're kind of important to Sage, and it gives a real context on the development and where the kind of product is heading in terms of Sage's AI tools, because there's quite a few out there now, and it's quite easy to get lost in the blanket term of AI, and hearing this was really important. Hopefully it's the same for you guys. So where we're currently at is that we've got obviously Sage Copilot, and again, this is the kind of the main interface. This is what end users mainly interact with, the see and the kind of the feel of the AI, and you feel it at work. This is the help guide assistant. We're going to look at the close assistant, which includes also the variance analysis generator. So we have essentially analytics based on our month-end close. Then you've got the intelligence engine. So this is essentially just the powerhouse in the background, and this is what makes Sage's AI accurate, trustworthy, and relevant to finance. And this is really key in the finance world. There are so many legislations, there's so many protection laws, and when in a world where there's a million different AI tools, you need to make sure you're backing the right horse. Really, the analogy I always like to use is you wouldn't take your car to get fixed in a cafe. Sage is it's a financial software company. It's got 40 years of experience in the financial technology world. These tools are developed with all the legislations in mind. Everything has been accounted for. This isn't something that's going to breach any kind of data regulations or anything like that. And that's the idea of the kind of intelligence engine. It's a Sage kind of brain, in the sense that It's Sage through and through. This isn't something that's been developed by an external AI company. Then we have the doers at Sage, class them. So we have the AI agents. These are the things that are essentially getting the work done on the user's behalf. So they handle multiple step processes, workflow orchestration. They handle all the heavy lifting that makes automation feel seamless. And when we talk about, the AI is doing the work, this is what we're talking about. This is what we're referring to. These are the AI agents. Next, we've got the environment. So the Sage platform, if you think of the Sage platform as an ecosystem, it's essentially the focal point that keeps everything connected, secure, and everything kind of working in harmony. It's where all the kind of workflows, the identity, the security, all the apps come together in one integrated environment. So you don't need a product stack of 50 AI finance tools on separate platforms, multiple separate servers, with each of the individual storage. You're spreading your security much thinner if you have 50 different tools, whereas with Intacct, you can essentially have everything in one place. And when you have everything in one place, not only is your data more secure, but also you're saving time. You're not spread across multiple platforms. You don't have to build integrations across multiple different platforms. You can have everything in one place. And then finally, Sage's guiding philosophy, authentic intelligence. Again, this is the key focal point of the campaign. If you've seen any marketing around Sage's AI campaign recently, if you live in London, it's everywhere. I've seen it in Loughborough and Coventry, so it's kind of unavoidable if you look up at the billboards. Authentic intelligence is everywhere. And this is kind of Sage's promise that AI should always augment people and not replace them. So one of Sage's core values, and you can look this up if you want on their website, is just to be human. So it essentially just reflects the same value or the same message in how they approach AI. And I've spent a lot of time at Sage, working at their offices, and I've seen and felt that human aspect. For a multi-billion-pound company of that size, you'd expect like a really corporate setup, but genuinely everyone's super down to earth. It's not super hierarchical, and that they really take that human kind of value really, really seriously. And again, that's reflected in how they want to basically develop their tools and market their AI. Then if we come on to the live features in Intacct, I'm going to show you just very briefly the slides for the top two, because I think, firstly, for GL outlier detection, there's not a ton to show you, to be honest. It's just basically just a warning sign, and I'd rather spend time on the other things which I think are more interesting. But I'll go into the detail and I'll explain how they actually work. They've also got Sage Intelligent Time. Again, I'm just going to show you a slide and explain it, because not everyone on the call is going to be working in projects. Not everyone's going to be entering timesheets. They don't need that explanation. I want to make sure that the session is just really tailored and kind of streamlined to exactly what people want to hear. And if you want to hear any about Sage Intelligent Time or anything more about GL outlier detection, just reach out to me or one of the team, and we can set up another call to go through that. But essentially, the four features we're going to go through on platform in the actual demo itself. We're going to go through the Copilot Search Guide Assistant. Again, for those using Intacct, you probably would have seen it, but it's still interesting for new people on the call to look at. We've also got the Close Assistant. This is a really, really interesting tool. I think this is probably the biggest thing that Sage have brought out in the last year or 18 months, and I'm quite excited to show you guys that. Then we've got AP automation invoice automation, sorry. Again, quite a saturated market, to be honest, but to have a tool like this on platform, again, not spreading yourself across multiple different systems. I'll touch on that briefly because people have probably seen AP automation demos before. And then I think the real kind of meat and potatoes of today, the Interactive Visual Explorer, essentially extrapolates a lot of the data that you have on Intacct using AI, and it has quite advanced analytics because of that. Brilliant. So I thought I'd just touch on these briefly. So GL outlier detection, essentially this is the unsupervised learning. This is the limited memory learning that we talked about. And it's probably the most prevalent and widely used AI that we all have, or a lot of our existing customers have at least. It's completely free of charge. So it comes with Intacct's core financial package. And it's a really good way to kind of dip your toe or get your feet wet when it comes to Sage's AI capabilities. We can just turn it on and it can just be there in the background. There's no there's a minimal configuration that we have to set up, but once it's switched on, it's kind of there and it's already doing the work. And I know that it's really useful for a lot of our customers. What it actually does, essentially what it does, I touched on it briefly, it reviews all of the database of entries that you have historically. And it might be, what do I normally post to payroll? How much is it normally? Which departments are usually tagged with these entries? And when it actually detects something irregular, it's going to cross-reference all those entries that you've had previously. And then if it's kind of sensing that something is suspicious or there's something that's not right, it's detecting some error or it was kind of fraudulent activity, it will make sure that the invoice, or sorry, the journal entry itself isn't posted, and it's going to remain in a draft state, sitting on your general ledger, waiting for review. And then once you've verified that the entries are correct, you can then go and kind of override the warning sign, and you can just basically post it to your general ledger. So it's a really, really handy tool. If you think about when it comes to month end and kind of reviewing and reconciling all of your sub ledgers and general ledgers, just having this kind of, I guess, data entry validation, which is just going to go on in the background for you, is just a really, really handy way of just saving yourself time and having to correct all those mistakes later down the line. Just take a quick sip of water. So next we've got Sage Intelligent Time. Again, I would have really liked to show you guys this, but I'm just very conscious of the fact that we don't just have people operating in projects on the call today. But again, if you wanted to look at this in more detail, please reach out to me. I'd love to show you this. I think it's so fascinating how something can do this. When you're entering timesheets, if you're working across a project which has spanned multiple months and you have all sorts of files associated with the project, whether that's Excel spreadsheets, Outlook calendar invites, presentations that people have given you where it's still classes as paid work, or it's still falling under kind of consultancy hours, or however you want to track your time. What we have with Sage Intelligent Time is essentially when you go to enter your timesheets, as opposed to having multiple tabs open, having your Outlook calendar open on one screen, having your all of your files from that project on another screen, or even worse, if you're just working on one screen itself and you're having to switch between all these tabs, we can have all of these things in one place. So as long as anything that you have in it, whether it's a file, an Outlook calendar invite, anything that you have in your computer which matches the name of the project as it exists on Intacct, you'll get an amalgamation of all of that information in the corner of your screen there. So right in the bottom left there, you have essentially a summary tab of all the information that you've gathered. And when you come to actually enter your timesheets, whether that's for the past week, fortnight, or month, we're going to have all that information in one place. So the amount of time you can save not having to go and kind of forage for all that information, you can just have it all in one tab in the corner there, and you can input all your time entry pretty much in one go. It's pretty fantastic when it comes to projects. Intacct's really strong when it comes to projects anyway, but this is one of the reasons for that. Again, we also have Sage Intelligent Time app, which has come out recently. So the time and expenses obviously come hand in hand, and you can start to track that from a mobile app that Sage have developed. And that's also really, really good. So if you want to look at that, just reach out and we could have a look at that in more detail. The final thing Sage have added as well recently, they've also put in geofencing. So for those familiar with geofencing, essentially if you have employees who are working on multiple different sites, or they might be working clocking in and out of an office, we can geofence a certain location so that when they arrive at the geolocation or the geographic location, we can essentially give them an automatic reminder, or when they leave, we can give them an automatic reminder to say, don't forget to put in your timesheet entries, and they can go on their mobile app, they get a notification on their phone, they can go on the mobile app, enter their timesheets, and then they're good to go. So that's in Sage Intelligent Time, and that brings us to, we've got one more slide I just wanted to chuck in, and then we're going to go into the demo. This is something that I found really, really interesting from one of the guys at Sage. So this is from Xero's chatbot that they have on their system. And I know Xero is a slightly smaller kind of finance solution, but I haven't, obviously I just work in Intacct, so I'm not too familiar with the other products, but they shared this with us, and this is essentially how different the chatbot is, and you can just kind of use this as a point of reference for when I actually go into the demo of how the kind of on-app assistant works. So you can see that essentially with Xero, what they've got, they've called it Jax. It's just Ask Xero, and what it is just it's just a ChatGPT chatbot that they have just embedded onto their Xero environment. And what that means is when you actually come to ask it questions, it's literally just delivering a ChatGPT, question or answer. So if you ever to put a question into ChatGPT, and if you've got an Intacct related question or anything that's finance related, it's going to give you quite general answers. And we can see the same thing here, where it's just basically giving you kind of information about various different resources that you don't know whether there's been validity checks on each of them. And then we've even got an example that came from Reddit on there that says, how much revenue did I earn in 2024? I can't complete that task as part of my current capabilities. Obviously, it can't complete that because you're asking a chatbot about something that you have on a separate system. So just bear that in mind when we look at the Sage Copilot in a second. Brilliant. So that's pretty much it on the actual slides front. If I just go into my instance here and I'll show you what the Intacct instance looks like. So for those of you who haven't worked or don't have an Intacct instance, I know there's a few of you on the call. To give you a kind of brief overview, this is what the homepage looks like. We have a breakdown of all of our entities in the system. So Intacct's strong suit is that it's a multi-entity shared environment, which means that I can operate at top level and I can have a cross-organizational view. Or if I want to jump into any of my specific entities, I can do that. If I want to enter any transactional data, or if I want to look at any of the data specific to each entity, I can do that. Just bear that in mind when we're going to look at this, the Copilot assistant. But first, I just wanted to show you the help guide assistant. So again, for those of you using Intacct, the on-platform support is pretty mega, to be honest. The help guides are super extensive. I mean, you can get help on this page if you ever, if you're new to Intacct, it's really helpful and you can't quite articulate a problem that you're experiencing. It's really helpful to just press help on this page, and all of a sudden you'll get a ton of resource based on the page that you're at. But then we've also got the help guide assistant. So where this, I think, really comes into its own is for procedural stuff. So let's say I just say how to raise a credit note. And essentially, as opposed to having to go through all of my help center, and there's a ton of resource on there, to be honest, sometimes there's so much on there where there's almost too much because you can't find specific things, but there is, literally a page for every page on the actual platform. So it's more of a case of finding the information as opposed to actually whether it exists or not. And this is where the help guide just becomes really handy. So we've got, I've pressed that a couple of times and it's loading up my old versions. Yeah, just to show you the kind of procedural breakdown that we have, as opposed to just finding, okay, well, this is, raising a credit note or whatever kind of step-by-step process we're looking to do. We can have a breakdown of exactly how to do that. And, as opposed to kind of conventional broad help guides where they're just kind of one size fits all, we can tailor this to exactly our problem. And then again, if you want, just a more general description, what's the difference between a location and apartment? Say you're a new user on Intacct. And again, really important to take away here is that this is all generated from Sage's help guides. This isn't something that is just spanning from a random AI chatbot. This is something that Sage have built, fully compliant with any kind of legislation, and everything is tailored to a certain set of resources. The help guides are what have provided these answers. This isn't just random websites on the internet. You know, if I just click on any of these, it's going to pull up the section of the help guide that has pulled up the information from. So it just makes navigating the actual on-platform support much easier. Brilliant. So secondly, we have our Copilot Help kind of close assistant. Now, for those of you familiar, or those of you who maybe have to carry out the task of month end, I think you'll see a lot of value in this. So where we start is we just start by running the close assistant, and what this does is essentially asking us what time period that we want to actually close the books for. And it's worth noting that the open close period kind of process on Intacct is quite different from a lot of legacy systems anyway, just in the sense that it's much easier to kind of go in and just open and close books kind of on the fly. If I wanted to just go in and close my AP, I could literally just go in and close a subledger, and I could do that for a specific entity or multiple entities. And then again, if I want to post to a closed period, I don't have to go back and open the period necessarily. I could just basically post an adjustment, and then I could instantly just post to a closed period. But as opposed to kind of legacy systems where maybe once the books are closed for a subledger, then the reports are then generated, and then that's kind of it. It's much more fluid and dynamic when it comes to Intacct. So we just start by selecting a reporting period. So let's go to 2025, and let's go to August. So I've selected my time period. And what it's going to do now is just essentially going to give me a summary of all of my different subledgers in the system and where they're at in terms of the closed period or the closed stages. You can see that for each subledger, I've got hyperlinks for each of my different subledgers. So I've got all of my unposted invoices that I could leave, or I could go and review, I should say. You can see that I've got no unposted invoices that are on there. Fantastic. I could then prepare an AP reconciliation report, and I can do this completely on the fly. I'm just selecting an entity that I want the reconciliation report to do that by, or I can just process without any filters. So let's just go for the PKF group, E100 entity. And then once it's completed, it said it's going to share with me, and it's going to pop up on the Insights tab on the top there. But once I jump to any of these stages on the system, so you notice how I jumped to the review unposted invoices hyperlink, and I can do the same for my accounts receivable. Again, these are slight Americanisms. I'm sure you can work it out: purchase ledger, sales ledger. But every time I jump to every different hyperlink, this tab remains on the side here. So as opposed to legacy systems where you may have multiple tabs open, and there may be user restrictions where if you have 2 tabs open on the same interface, then it's going to think someone's breaking in, and the system crashes, and all of a sudden you lose all of your progress. This tab is going to remain on the side here, so I can keep track of everything that I'm doing, and I can work on the left side here, and I can keep the summary and this kind of track of where I'm at whilst I'm working. So I can then go through, and once I've looked at, you can see then my reconciliation reports come through. So let's have a look at that. This was one yesterday I did as a test. Again, great news. There's no variation between AP Ledger and General Ledger in any of your entities. If I want to then look at any more reconciliation reports, I could do that, and I can just select a different filter and then do it for a different entity if I would like to. And then once I'm doing that, obviously I can just work through my different subledgers. I'm not going to go through all of them now, just for the sake of time, but you can see exactly how it would work. I can just review my bank reconciliations. I can review any unposted journal entries. So again, thinking back to our GL outlier assistant, if we have any journals that have essentially just been flagged as fraudulent, or maybe a mistake based on an unusual department or an unusual value or an unusual account pairing, they will just sit in this unposted kind of draft journal entries state, which we can then go back to, we can review them, and then once we're ready, then we can close the GL. And what's also really nice is we get this closed book overview tab, which is really nice. And again, notice how this tab's staying here. I can just minimize that if I want to. But essentially, this gives me a summary of all of my different entities that I've got. Again, entities are so important in Intacct, multi-entity shared environment. And I've got a summary of each subledger, when it was closed last, accounts receivable closed for each individual entity. And if I actually go to close one of my subledgers, let's go to my AP subledger, I can choose whether I want to close that for each individual entity or if I want to do that for all entities in one go. So I don't have to treat each individual trading entity that I have in the system as a unique company. Even though they are unique companies, I can kind of take a consolidated view or a consolidated action, I guess, just to basically do it in one blanket kind of move. And then, yeah, again, I'm not going to go through and close all of them now, but you can see exactly how it would work. Again, nice big green tick once I've done all of that. And then I can start to generate my variance analysis based on basically, yeah, each individual subledger, or I can just do one big GL variance analysis right at the end. Brilliant. So that's kind of everything for the closed system. If you've got any questions on any of that, obviously put a question in the chat and I can revisit that at the end. But otherwise, I'm going to move on to the AP automation again. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this just because I think it's probably something that people have seen before. But I'll just take an example of an old invoice that I've got and I've used previously. To give some context, there's two ways that we can upload invoices. So when I'm talking about AP automation, I'm talking about supplier invoices that we can essentially just upload straight onto the system. And when the system receives the invoice, it's going to use the OCR technology, the optical character recognition technology, to recognize the fields that are on the invoice. It's going to pick up the supplier. It's going to pick up the information from the table itself. So totals, memos, departments, anything that's on the actual invoice that we can translate into the system, it will essentially auto-populate that onto the system for us. Now, as I said, there's two ways that we can upload invoices. We can do it manually, so we can go directly via our purchase ledger module, or alternatively, we get unique email addresses for each of our different entities that we've got in the system. So if I go to my email services tab, you can see I get the option to choose whether I want a single line item that summarizes the total, or if I want to break that out by all the individual line items on the invoice, I can have it upload either way. So if I get one supplier invoice and it's got 100 lines, I can keep those 100 lines if I want to, or I can just summarize that into a single line. Then we've also got bounce back notifications. So if we want to, we're going to look at in a sec, there's multiple different file formats that we have which are acceptable. But if for whatever reason the upload or the email fails, we can just put in an email address. This might be your account's email or financial controller's email, or whoever's the clerk who deals with the AP side. We can just put in their email. They'll then be notified that the import was unsuccessful, or the upload via the email was unsuccessful. So you get full visibility kind of every step of the way. There's not going to be an invoice that just gets completely lost in the kind of in the void. And then again, just as I touched on there, we get individual email addresses for each different entity that we've got in the system, or we could even tailor these to be specific locations in the system. So if you've got different offices that you want to route that to, we could have an email address, and there's multiple ways that you could approach this. What we have is we have a couple of customers who do slightly different things. So again, in theory, you could actually just give this email to your suppliers, and they could email those invoices directly to that email address, and then your suppliers are essentially just uploading the invoices for you. And then the AI is doing all the work, and you can imagine how much time that would save, not only middleman in the email, changing it to correct file format, uploading it or reading it, and then basically keying in the information onto the system. We can just have that process fully automated and upload the invoice straight onto the system. Now, if I go back to show you the manual process, and again, most of our customers don't use this, but it's good to understand the kind of, or at least illustrates the process, I guess. We can select specific locations. So if I've got a location that I want to route it to, I could do that specific location as opposed to the entity. So I want to be more specific with an office or a region, I can do that. And then all I have to do is I can drag and drop up to 30 files at a time. as long as they're in the format of PDF, JPG, standard image files, JPEG, TIFF, HEIC, XML, PNG, and again, each file, as long as it's under 20 megabytes, which is very, very generous, then we can upload the invoice. The OCR starts to work. It's picking up the fields and it's populating onto the fields on the actual system. And then again, I'm conscious of time, so let's just have a look at an invoice that I've uploaded previously, and we can pull up the PDF that was actually invoiced, and you can see it's picked up the supplier. It's also populated all of the address information. It's attached the actual PDF to the transaction in the system. It's got the due date. It's picked up the invoice number, and then if we actually go down to our entries table, my AP automation version that I have, or the tool that I have, is quite nascent, but with time, stuff like the account, well, the GL account will be auto-populated, because I will, every time I review this invoice, I can then say, okay, well, I want to route it to this GL account. You can see it's picked up the transaction amount automatically. It's got the location already. I haven't got any tax because my subtotal was already at 70, but I've got my memo in there as well, and then obviously it's picked up my supplier. And then once I'm ready, I can just post this to my purchase ledger, my accounts payable. And it's just important that we have this kind of final human review. This is the thing that Sage keep kind of hammering home. We have this authentic intelligence. This isn't something that's going to completely, do everything for you. This is something that still needs that kind of last review of human eyes. Cool. So that's kind of it on the accounts payable invoice automation. I think the thing I'm most excited to show you guys today is the interactive visual explorer. So again, I touched on it briefly it's probably the start during one of the slides. What we have with the interactive visual explorer is essentially we're able to extrapolate data based on what we have in the system. So if you think about when we have the dashboards in the system, we're kind of looking at the data that already exists and exactly as it is in the system. And again, this is a real-time data. It's a true cloud solution. So everything that's on the system is being entered live, and that will update the dashboards in real time. But I always like to use the analogy, when we're looking at a dashboard, we're kind of looking at everything that already exists in the system. So I like to make the analogy of like a 2D view. And that 2D view is like, we're looking at a square front on. But then when I like to think about the interactive visual explorer, I like to think about it as kind of like a 3D view, where we can actually start to manipulate and look at our data at different angles, and that square becomes a cube, and we can see what the real story is, as opposed to what it actually appears on the surface. And then let's just choose a reporting area. So I'm just going to go for AR sales invoice. All I'm doing here is I'm creating a new visual board completely from scratch. So think of this as like a dashboard. I'm giving it a name. I can choose a report audience if I want. I can categorize it into a certain type of report type if I'd like to as well. Then I just have to click create the visual board. This might take a second because I've got multiple tabs open. And then you'll see I'll get taken to this page. Essentially what we have here is this tab along the left is where we can source, or we can pull all the data that we have from the system. So you can see that I chose my object to be my AR sales invoice details. So essentially all of the data that I can pull is from AR sales invoice data. What we've got along the second column here, this is essentially my kind of like my drawing book. This is how I want to display the data. So this is the objects, this is the actual data itself. This is choosing how I want it to be displayed. And then this is essentially our whiteboard, or this is our kind of preview of what the data is going to look like. Then at the bottom, you can see I've got multiple different sheets. I can work on multiple tabs, just like I'm working on Excel. I could have multiple tabs open, and I can start to work on, multiple things on one time. I can rename this to whatever I want. I'm just going to put this to AR customer by Nick. There we go, perfect. I think it might be one already in there, so let's change that. And then if we start to actually work on a workbook, the attributes, the dimensions, the measures, those of you work on Intacct, we know what dimensions are. These are tags in the system. They're used to categorize the data. The attributes, this is where a lot of the bulk of the data is. So if I just start by picking up a customer name, and I'm going to drag and drop, this is how intuitive it is. I'm literally just dragging and drop fields onto where I'd like the data to appear. So I'm getting the customer name from the invoice, and I'm going to go for a horizontal stacked bar. And so along the y-axis, I've got my customer name. And then if I go back, and I'm going to my measures, these are more of the kind of figures themselves. I'm going to pull my transaction amount for each sales invoice. I'm literally just going to drag and drop that onto my x-axis. And you can see straight away, I've built a pretty complex dashboard. This may be reminiscent of kind of Power BI. I'd say it's probably quite closely related to Power BI in the sense of how it actually displays the data. Again, if you want to have a conversation about how this is different to Power BI, obviously we have this already inbuilt into the system. Power BI, you'd have to build an integration. You may need an in-house person to build your reports. You can see how easily I've just built one right here. You don't need 3 years of experience from a data analyst to build a report for you. We can literally have this on platform. You don't have to pay for a connector. You can just have one person on the finance team who does a bit of training, and then they could go off. And we have customers who've basically learned, and then they teach other people in their company, and that's really, really great to see because it's that intuitive to pick up. And when we're looking at that, you might think, okay, well, that's already pretty complex, but it's a little bit messy. We've kind of got multiple different lines, and obviously every time I hover over any of these, I can get a breakdown on any of them that I like. But we can actually start to layer up a lot of this information. So you can see that I've got my x-axis, and we looked at the y-axis already. That's pretty straightforward. But let's say I actually want to categorize an extra layer of information. So let's say, okay, I actually want to say, well, what about the total paid by each customer? And I want to categorize that based on color. You can see then I can just put in the color, and all of a sudden we have a scale along the bottom which shows us who's paid what and the breakdown of essentially each customer categorized on how much they've actually paid as well. And we also have the lines there. We'd probably adjust the colors there slightly, but you can get an idea of how we can actually use the information to display the data. And then we can also, obviously, once the data is on there, I can literally just go in and change any of the graphs literally in real time. I've just got all of my different graphs on here. I've got this radar area. And then again, I've got a breakdown of everything. I could just pick out my transaction amount, and I could say, actually, I want my total paid, and I just want that to be displayed on there. You can see how intuitive it is to kind of set these up, and then I can go in and change any of this on the fly. And then what you eventually get is you can get one of these. You can get a dashboard like this where you have multiple different graphs. We can have multiple different data sets. This is an AR current aging analysis. And again, this is starting to look like more of a kind of Power BI breakdown. Everything is kind of expandable, I guess, or everything you can drill down onto this data. And we can have multiple tabs again. So I can have one spreadsheet where I then have a really detailed AR aging, age debt report, and then I can have that broken down into individual reports, and I can essentially have one big dashboard with a really, really detailed breakdown of everything that I would like the data to be displayed as. That's really, really interesting. That's the thing I probably find most interesting with extrapolating the data, and I think where the AI capabilities are really strong on Intacct. I'm just going to jump now back to the final few slides because that's everything on the demo. I know that was relatively short, but I think it's quite important to kind of keep these things concise. And then if you want to see anything in greater detail, then just please reach out and we can set up another call. But just to close, I've just got 5 minutes on this, and we can have kind of 5-6 minutes on questions at the end. The 3 ways, this is the kind of Sage's AI roadmap, where they're looking to head, what we already looked at, just to give you an idea of what's to come. So 3 waves of AI. First wave, we had the Sage Copilot. That's the generative AI system. That was just the help guide assistant, which was kind of strong, but it's just the start of interacting with the AI and getting used to essentially just using that day to day. And then obviously then we have the close assistant, which then becomes kind of more procedural, I guess. It starts to carry out processes for us, and that's where the AI, the kind of agentic AI, starts to come into play. And we have that kind of embedded automation as opposed to just a chatbot that we're kind of interacting with. And then you can see in the future to come, we can have really, really tailored answers based on what we put into the system. So how many outstanding bills do I have? And they can get an instant breakdown of how many invoices we have that are outstanding, and I can drill down into any of that. And that's the kind of the AI, the agentic AI that's still to come. After that, we then have, let's flip to the next screen. We have just a quick breakdown of what makes something agentic. So again, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but when we think about agentic AI, what does that actually mean? So to give you a rough kind of breakdown, we have something that is essentially has reasoning and decision making. So it's something that can kind of use its own thoughts to make decisions, and it doesn't just apply to kind of fixed rules. It can actually analyze alternatives. It can prioritize kind of exceptions, and determine what needs attention whilst keeping users in control of what they're actually doing. Then we've got context awareness. So when we're talking specifically about finance, it's especially important to remember the context. We don't want to think about the JAX zero bot that we were looking at. We don't want something that just gives us a very general answer. We want answers that are tailored based on historical patterns that we've put into the data, based on period over period behavior that we've actually input into the system. We want stuff that's specific to each customer, and we want it to be within the context that the agents, we're going to look at in a second, the assurance agent or the AP agent, like to surface meaningful insight as opposed to just general information. Then we've got multi-step orchestration. So again, I touched on this briefly. It's being able to autonomously basically carry through multiple steps in one swoop. So, finance work is never just a single action. It's never just, one thing and then you're done. It spans the capture, validation, approvals, reconciliation, and then of course close. And the Sage agents are essentially designed to orchestrate those steps rather than stopping at a single insight or task. It's essentially just automating the process as opposed to each individual action. Then autonomy, but with guardrails, which is really important for Sage. So autonomy doesn't necessarily mean acting without oversight. I have said it so many times, and the authentic intelligence philosophy is what's really, really important to Sage. The autonomy means that the agent can operate continuously without a manual prompt every time, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't need validation at the end. We still need a human review right at the end, just to make sure that everything works and everything is correct. We're never going to be able to just hand a task to, do my job for me, go make me a coffee whilst you're at it. That's a bit unrealistic. This is kind of where we're at now, and it's what Sage are taking really, really seriously. Then action taking, just kind of making sure they're executing the changes and just ensuring that the agents either take steps to make the appropriate decisions and just validating that again, as I mentioned. Learning and adaptation, multi-agent coordination, kind of tying together kind of the why now, understanding why it's taking out a task, and then when it comes to the coordination, just making sure that it supports longer term direction as opposed to just kind of continuous accounting. And then a look at what's to come in terms of the agents that are coming. So we have the AP agent. So again, we get a little kind of dose of what's already there. So we have creating draft or invoices. We've got matching to purchasing transactions, reducing manual data entry. We looked at all of that, but then we're going to be able to have more advanced analysis based on everything that we've input. And then of course we have time agent, touched on that, Sage Intelligent Time. That's really powerful. Assurance agent, again, we saw a dose on the close assistant. There's more to come on that. Sage are looking to build out processes to them as opposed to having to go and check each subledger manually, we can essentially ask it to do it for us and go away and do that. And then the financial intelligence agent, this is essentially, ask us questions, get insights, find records from transactions. And that's really, really exciting. Final quote I just wanted to end on. I think it's really important to, again, just take a step back sometimes and appreciate like where we're at. And I think this, for me, just really encapsulates exactly what Sage are about, and how they are choosing to operate at the moment, how they're navigating this kind of AI world. AI allows us to elevate the work that humans do to be more valuable, and it lets humans focus on the unique skills that AI will never be able to replicate. So it's just really important that this isn't something that's going to take your job. This is something that's going to help you do your job. And I think that's just a really key takeaway from not only today, but Sage's kind of message and their goal when it comes to building these AI tools. So that's pretty much everything from the presentation. Now, if you have any questions, please fire them into the chat, and we can give a go answering. And hopefully, if you want to speak about any of this further down the line, then reach out and we can have a chat.
Yeah. Brilliant. That was really, really insightful, Nick. Thank you so much for sharing all those AI features that you can have within Intacct. I like what you covered at the end about it not taking jobs, because that was one of the questions. How do I know this type of AI won't be replacing my job? So as you said, it's never designed to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, just to go back to the point where I've done a lot of work at Sage and how seriously they take their values. I can't remember all of them, but the human one always sticks with me because they really appreciate the work that people do.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I mentioned that this 40 years of kind of financial technology experience. It's a tool built by accountants. If you look into Sage's story, how it kind of came from, it's been in the space for so long. It understands how people operate, and it's not here to kind of tread on anyone's toes. It's here to assist people as much as it can. So yeah, absolutely not here to kind of take someone's job. Like I've made the analogy of it's never going to go and be able to close all your books for you and then actually make you a tea at the same time. It's there to help you with your processes as opposed to take your job. Absolutely.
Yeah. Another question: would AI be able to help build some specific reports referencing an existing report that Sage Intacct has?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we looked at, maybe I didn't cover it too well on the visual board, but when I was creating the board, I had the option to actually to use an existing board that I had, and on the boards we looked at an example at the end where it had multiple different sheets. I could just choose, that was a template that came out the box. So if you were to use Interactive Visual Explorer, you wouldn't have to then create each template from scratch. There are pre-built templates that you can use, and not only can you use them and it's going to adjust to your data, you can also use that as a template for your own unique dashboard. So on there was a quite complex age debt reports. Yeah, absolutely. You could use that to essentially route, or you could use that as a template to build new reports, and then again add that to a dashboard, have it run once a week, schedule it to send to certain people whether they're an Intacct user or not. But yeah, absolutely, really good question.
Yeah, brilliant. We've also got how do I know that I can trust the data that AI is producing? Is there a way of knowing if it's correct?
Yeah, let me quickly go back onto my Intacct environment. So on here we have, and this will be on all of our existing Intacct customers, you'll have this. We have a responsible AI button, which is at the bottom of each instance. And essentially, if I go to click through that, we get a breakdown of everything in terms of compliance and everything that's basically everything I've talked about today. Sage's commitment to making sure that the AI is safe, it fits legislation, and that it's something we can trust. Yeah, absolutely. That's where you can find it.
Yeah, amazing. That's really helpful. And then one final question, I believe, before the end of the session. Thank you all, by the way, for sticking with us, even though it's running over a little bit. If AI makes a mistake on the invoice or journal, how can I spot it? and can I put it right?
Yeah. So we kind of covered it briefly on the outlier detection. So, and again, it also does it on the AP automation tool. So we have everything that is reviewed or is flagged by AI. It's going to sit in a draft state. It has that final verification from humans. That is something, again, Sage find is kind of essential to the way that we work. Yes, it's going to sit in a draft state, and it's going to make sure that it's not going to be posted automatically without essentially making sure that what is being flagged correctly, and why is it being flagged.
Perfect. Okay, those are all the questions. As Nick said, if you do want to see anything in more detail, please reach out to either myself, Nick, or I'm sure many of you are in touch with Sam. So yeah, please feel free to reach out, and we're happy to do a more in-depth demo for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just pop my I'll put my email on screen just in case people don't have it. I've just stopped sharing my screen, but I'll put it back on. Where is it? Here it is, just in case anyone doesn't have my information. Let's get this open. There we are. But yeah, if you've got any questions, just drop me an email, and I'd be happy to have a chat with you guys.
Hang on, Nick, there have been a few more questions.
Oh yeah.
It was blocked on my screen.
No
I apologize. So can Sage AP automation complete matching to purchase orders and take GL code / department information from the PO itself, so there's less to manually enter? Yeah,
absolutely. So part of the two-way matching is how Sage kind of brand it at the moment. So yeah, matches to PO. They're also developing three-way matching to come in the future. So you do good receive notes. That's a feature that's going to come sometime. But yeah, absolutely. On the GL account example that you said, as part of the kind of database of knowledge that Sage have, the Intacct instance have, been saying Sage too much today. It's going to know every time that you basically change the entries table to the GL account, or every time that it's matching to a PO, and on the PO there's those GL accounts, it will recognize that over time, and that will be part of the information it uses to populate the information on the invoice with time. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. This is actually a really important question. I'm not sure that we covered this. I've got the Copilot help search, but not the Copilot icon at top. Is this something within the core Intacct package, or does this need to be switched on / purchased?
So when we're talking about, I'll go through both, because I guess the guys probably might not be able to answer in real time. The Copilot, this Copilot is for the close assistant. So this Copilot icon is essentially for an additional tool, which is the close assistant we looked at. I'd be more interested to know if you don't have this help guide. I'd be very surprised, but if you don't, then reach out and we can get that set up for you. This is completely free of charge. This will just get added to your instance normally, and then this is a paid add-on. The close assistant, this icon here, is a paid add-on, but you should have this one, and if you don't, then reach out.
Yeah, and with the outlier detection, is that also part of an additional module?
Yes, I believe it comes with the GL. But I had to switch it on. We had to switch it on, but it's not an additional module. Okay. We should just be able to switch it on. Whether it may sometimes there's tiered pricing based on the usage, kind of like with the AP invoice automation. So I'd have to look at the exact commercials. I don't really deal with the commercials, to be honest, but I can have a look. I can have a look at that for you.
Yeah, that's definitely something as well. You can speak to either your account manager, or like I said, you can feel free to reach out to me, myself, Sam, Chris, or Rich, to be able to help you with that. Yep. Another quick one. This is the final one before we go. Sorry, guys, for running over. Can we set approvals on Intacct, or does somebody from Sage have to set it up for us?
Great question. No, super easy to set up. We can just completely go and do these on the fly. So if we have a look, there's multiple different types of approval policies that we can set up, as long as you have access to purchasing configuration. So just making sure that permissions are basically set up in a certain way. We have transaction definitions, which basically just define the workflow of the purchasing process. And then when we want to, we can just go in and set these up for each individual stage. So at the moment, I've got a purchase requisition, goes to purchase order, invoice all the way down to my credits. I just choose which stage that I want to set up an approval for, and whether I want that to be a value approval, value progressive. So if I want the actual value is to be progressive, department, user level, all sorts of different types that we have. So if I just go value approval, and then I go to look at the tiers that I can set up, I can literally go in again. I can set up a demo if you guys want to run over this in more detail, and then how many levels for each value range. So 0 to 250, I want one approver, 250 to 500, want two approvers, so on and so forth. But no, the answer is we can set them up. Super easy to set up, very intuitive. We don't need stage for that.
Very easy. Thank you so much, Nick. Okay, as we said, if you do have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to any one of us or the existing Smith Cooper contact you have. But once again, thank you so much, Nick. That was a really, really insightful demo. All right, perfect. Thanks, everyone. Have a lovely day.
Thanks for your time today, everyone. Bye-bye.